Hi there, fifth graders. Today you are going to use this video presentation to help you add some pages into your interactive notebook. So before you begin, you're going to need to make sure that you do have your notebook. You need your scissors, your glue, and your pencil. You are going to need to go ahead and have 3 new vocabulary flaps put in your notebook. Please refer to the table of contents for the page number that you need to glue the vocabulary flaps to. This section of vocabulary that we are adding today is called taxation without representation. Now, there's a lot of big words there that we are going to try to break down for you today so that you will be ready for the next activity that we're going to be doing in class. When you look at taxation without representation, are there any words that you see within those larger words that are familiar to you? I'm guessing that you're going to have seen the word tax and the word represent. Both of those words should be familiar to you. Some of you probably have heard of your parents talking about paying taxes this time of year, which a tax, we're going to get to that here on the next slide and talk more about that definition. But many of you are also familiar with the word represent. And we've talked a lot about how we represent our school or how we act or speak in front of someone that's representing who we are, okay? Then the ending of the word ation, you're going to see that here. Ation is a suffix that means an action, okay? So in this situation, we're going to be talking about the colonists who were being taxed without being represented. And so we're going to dig into that a little bit deeper today. So hopefully by now, if you don't have your vocabulary flaps glued in, go ahead and pause this video and get those glued down because we are ready to start your first vocabulary word. The first word that you're going to add to your flap is taxes. Please make sure to write the word taxes in the top rectangle of your flap. Remember that the picture goes in the square part and the definition goes underneath the flap. For your definition today, you're going to write money that people pay to the government. Now, we already talked about that today. We still pay taxes. We pay taxes to the state. We pay taxes to the federal government. And that money does a lot of different things. It pays for city and state leaders. It pays for police, for firemen, for your schools, for new roads to be built, for any maintenance that needs to be done in your city. Also pays for government programming. But the taxes that were being put upon the colonists during this time were to help pay off the debt from the French and Indian War. And we've already read a lot about the French and Indian War and learned about that. And if you remember, the colonists had to call in some backup to help them to be able to win the French and Indian War. And so when they called in their backup, they called in their British friends. And we talked about how when the British came, it wasn't free. They had to pay for food, they had to pay for transportation, they had to pay for clothing and places for them to stay. And because they spent all of that money to get the British here, the colonists had to pay the British back. And so the best way that the king saw fit for them to pay this money back was to be taxing them on different things that were shipped to the colonies. So taxes, make sure that you have that on your foldable flap, and we will be ready for our next slide. The next word I want you to add today is repeal. Now, repeal means to take back or reverse or cancel. And we're going to be talking more about the specific taxes that were imposed upon the colonists. But as you can imagine, much of this frustrated them a little bit. They were still controlled greatly by the British, but they didn't feel like they were necessarily supported by the British in having to pay back all of this money. And so a lot of the taxes they felt were unfair, and so they wanted those taxes to be repealed or taken back. or reversed. So when I think about the word repeal, sometimes I think about a banana and taking the peel off. I'm taking it back so that I can eat the banana, which you guys know that I don't eat bananas, but my children do. So repeal, make sure you have that on your vocabulary foldable, and we will be ready for our final slide. Our final slide is what we're going to be talking more about in your next in-class lesson, which is taxation without representation. And we already talked about that word tax, and we talked about represent. And so what was going on here with taxation without representation was that the British were requiring the colonists to pay taxes even though they had no say in the tax. So the British government and their parliament was saying, you will pay us money for these different things. Some of that was the importing of sugar. Anytime they had to have a legal document signed, they would have to pay a tax on that. They taxed them on tea. Anything that was brought into the colonies, they had to pay extra tax on that in order for it to be taken off of the ship. And so the parliament was telling them this was what they were going to be doing, but they didn't have any say in that. And the colonists did not like that. And so their big motto became no taxation without representation. And you're going to see what that might feel like to be taxed upon things that you don't have any say in our next in-class lesson. So please go ahead, make sure your vocabulary is complete. Make sure that you have your pictures in there to help you remember, and add color if you would like. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And can't wait to see you soon. Talk to you later.